Yo, what's up guys, my name is Severman and in today's video I will show you how to process progressive house leads. So for this tutorial I'll be using the FLP of my latest progressive house track called Feel Young, so let's dive right into it. So just in case you don't know the track yet, let me play you the drop real quick so that you know what we'll be looking at in today's tutorial. Let's go. Yeah, so that's what the drop sounds like. If you want to check out the full song, feel free to check out the first link in the description. But now let me show you what the leads sound like with the processing on. So that's what the leads sound like individually, and what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna remove all the effects on the leads and then I'm gonna basically process them all once again from scratch in order to basically show you how I would process my leads. Just a disclaimer, I'm not gonna show how to layer leads. I already did a tutorial on that, so I will also link it in the description. But today's tutorial is focused on processing only, so let's go. Alright guys, so I've just removed all the effect plugins on the leads. So let me show you now how the leads sound without any processing at all. As you can tell, there actually isn't a huge difference here. And that's something that I think is worth mentioning or worth pointing out here, is because you want to make sure that the sounds that you pick already sound good without any processing. If you take leads that sound like trash without processing, or let's say if you don't have any processing on the leads and they sound good and you think, yeah, I will make them sound good with the processing, that's not the right approach. You want to make sure that you pick good presets or sounds in the first place, because that will make the processing much easier for you. So what processing essentially is about is enhancing your sound to make sure that it sits nice in the mix. But what processing is not is fixing a sound that isn't good in the first place already. Now let me show you how I routed my individual layers here on the mixer channel, because it might seem a bit confusing. So here I have 11 leads that I got sent from Glad, who is one of the collaborators on this track. But I ended up muting the leads 1 to 9 because I wanted to use different leads. So I ended up only using leads 10 and 11, which sound like that. And then I added new leads to those two stems. So all the new leads I layered to one channel, to channel 20, and then I have one separate white noise layer that I routed to channel 21. I just left this effect on here because all I did here was I just removed the low. So I just wanted to have this high end from that white noise sound. So how I approach processing is I always pretty much route all sounds to one channel and then I process them on the bass channel. This is how I process my sounds. So you can put like the EQ on the bass channel, you can put the reverb on the bass channel, sidechain. So you don't need to put those effects on like 20 or 10 different or individual layers, if that makes sense. So yeah, let me show you the bass channel real quick. So I routed the white noise channel to my like new leads channel, I called it, which is this one. And then I routed this new leads channel and all of the previous leads from Glad to the lead bass channel. So on this channel right here, again, it's a bit confusing, but on this channel here, I will process all the sounds. This is where all leads are going into. So now, long story short, the first effect that I always have on my lead bass channel is an EQ. And for my EQs, I always use the Fruity Parametric EQ2. I really like how easy it is to use. So yeah, what I do here is I always select this 20 Hz plus 18 kHz cut, and then I adjust basically the frequency. So for the high cut, I always set it to 16 kHz. I always want to make sure that I cut away frequencies that you don't hear. But then what's more important is actually the low cut, because here you make sure that the leads don't clash with any of the bass sounds or the chords or kick drums or whatever. So for the low cut, I usually set it to around 200 Hz. This is the area where the leads would usually sit in, from like 200 Hz and above, basically. If the leads go much lower than 200 Hz, then there's probably something wrong with the octaves. You maybe want to make sure that the leads play an octave higher. If they go way below 200 Hertz. Then next up, what I would do is I would add a second EQ. And now I would go more into detail. So what always helps here is using a span. So this allows you to double check the frequency curve or response. This already looks pretty good. I think what I did in the original track was I boosted the lower mid area just a tiny bit, I think. Now, next up, besides the EQing, what's really important for the processing is reverb. So that's what I open up next, is I open up the reverb, but I also use the P controller in combination with my reverb. And what I usually do is I link the wet signal of the reverb to the P controller, and the P controller basically detects the signal that's coming into it. Effectively, we're basically sidechaining the wet signal to the dry signal with the P controller. So I always link to controller here. Then you just need to select the correct P controller, which, like, the P controllers are always shown here at the top, and this one here is Fruity P controller lead bus. And then you want to make sure that you select P controller peak. And then what's important here is that you set this one to inverted so that it sidechains it. And now you can see how the wet signal is already moving. Now what I do here in the P controller is I always set the bass to 20% because that will make sure that the wet signal doesn't go above 100% here. And then with the volume knob here, you can select how intense you want the sidechain to be. I think something like that is okay. Then with the decay, you can also adjust that one to sort of smoothen out that motion a bit. If you were to increase the decay to 100%, it would react very fast. And if you maybe like reduce it, you will see it becomes slower, like the reaction becomes slower. And I usually set it to like 45%. I feel like that's still smooth, but not like too quick, but neither too slow. I think that's sort of the sweet spot here. And then let's talk about the reverb settings themselves actually. So for the low cut, I usually increase that one to around 600 Hertz. Like, depends on the leads. Sometimes I also go higher because you want to make sure that you don't have too much lows in the reverb because that will muddy up the sound. And with the high cut, I usually set it to 10k Hertz. And then with the decay time, I usually set it to 3.5 seconds on my leads, which is already a lot. But in this track, I actually went even longer with the decay time. I set it to 5 seconds actually. So you see, once I stop the leads, you have this really nice sort of smooth tail at the end, which I think sounds really good. Then what I think is the third most important effect for the lead processing is sidechain. So for the sidechain, I usually just use the Nicky Romero Kickstart plugin. I think it's a really easy to use plugin. And for the leads, I usually use the Free Punch preset. And then with the mix knob, I usually set it to something between 50 to 60%. Sounds pretty clean, doesn't it? So in my opinion, the most important effects for lead processing are EQing, reverb, and sidechain. These are the three main effects that you definitely want to have on your lead processing. But that's of course not all yet. What I like to add is a stereo enhancer, usually to my leads. I usually just use the Fruity stereo enhancer, and then I just use the stereo separation knob. This one will basically enhance the stereo information that you have in the sound. But let's say if you had a sound that's 100% mono, you would need to use the phase offset or basically another stereo shaper, because if you just increase the separation, it won't do anything to a mono sound. But again, if you have a sound that already has a little bit of stereo information, you can use this one. This will sound very clean without, like, it won't mess up the mono compatibility. It really depends here. Like, also here you can double check on span. Just take a look at the correlation meter. You don't want to have the leads go into the minus direction. I think this already looks fine, but one thing that I would actually recommend is putting the stereo enhancer before the reverb. Because the reverb out of the Fruity Reverb 2 plugin is stereo. We only want to enhance the width of the dry signal, so I would recommend putting the stereo enhancer before the reverb. Now, what I did in the original track for the original processing that I had on the leads was I added the ozone. Yeah, it's actually called Isotope Ozone 5 Imager. So again, also make sure that you have this one before the reverb. And then here you can go even more into detail with the stereo enhancing. So you can set up like individual bands, and I think what I did in the original track was I set up 3 bands. So let me remove this one. I think I had it set up like that in the original processing. And what I did then was I actually reduced the stereo width again here in the second band and the first band. So I felt like the lower mids or the lows in the leads were too wide, so I reduced them. And then I also actually ended up reducing this lower, or actually the whole mids area again by like 20%. So again, let's listen to it. So now we got the EQing, stereo enhancing, reverb and sidechain. And 2 more plugins that I like to have on my lead bass channel are OTT, which is a plugin that you probably see in a lot of other videos as well. It's just like a tiny little plugin that works really, really well. It's also easy to use. So what it does, it basically compresses the lead sound a bit, which I think helps it to sort of glue the leads a bit more together. So what I always do is I basically set the depth to 0 and then I just turn it up a little bit. You just want to have like a little bit of the OTT on it. I'll probably put it before the reverb as well, because you don't want to compress that reverb too much, because then you'll end up with too much reverb. I think that's pretty good. I think it just adds like 5% more to the lead sound. And then the second plugin that I also like to use on my leads is the Transpire plugin. If you don't know this one, this is a free transient processor. So this one will enhance the transients basically of the leads. And the transients are sort of the loudest peaks of it, which are usually at the start of each note. So this one will add more punch to the sound. Awesome, I think this sounds really good now. Now let me turn off the Transpire and the OTT again. Now again with OTT and the transient shaper. These aren't plugins that you necessarily need to have, but they really help to just add like 5 or 10% more to the lead sound to really enhance them. So once again, the most important effects for the lead processing are, first of all, EQing. You want to make sure that you low and high cut them to give them the range, then maybe add some more detailed EQing to really glue them together with the other sounds. Then you want to have some reverb on them in order to give them depth, because if you don't have reverb on them, they will sound way too dry and that won't sound good in the mix. And then the third most important effect is the sidechain in order to give the kick drum the space it needs. And besides those 3 effects, what you can do is you can add a stereo enhancer like we did, maybe even a like multi-band stereo enhancer in order to be more precise with the stereo enhancing. You can add a transient shaper like we did here with the Transpire, a bit of compression as well like we did with OTT. And that's pretty much it. You could obviously still maybe add some saturation or something. A lot of people like to use FabFilter plugins. I don't have them, but I think they're also a great tool. What else you could maybe also use a little bit of distortion if you want to have a bit more of that like dirty sound. But that's pretty much it with this video, with this tutorial, guys. So I hope you liked it. I hope you could learn something from it.